So I started out with a cube and I gave it some dimensions just so that I could get the size that I wanted. I then added some loop cuts and dragged out some of the vertices just to get a particular shape. I added some more loop cuts just to retain the shape once I add a subsurface modifier. Then I adjusted the size to the bottom half a bit and applied the subsurface modifier. I'm going to select some of the faces at the front and inset them and then just extrude them inwards and adjust the size of my mesh a bit. I selected some faces at the side and used loop tools to turn it into a circle and inset them and extrude them inwards for the arms where I'm going to put the arm socket. Then I add some cylinders to the scene and hide them because I'm going to use them later. Then I select some faces on the bottom half and delete it, select the edges and then just extrude them upwards. I'm going to use some loop cuts, bevel them and extrude them inwards just to create some kind of grid and then apply a subsurface modifier to it. And then I'm going to inset the top face and also the bottom face. For the other cylinder, I bevel the bottom edge, inset the top, and just extrude it downwards. Select the bottom face and extrude it downward. Then inset and extrude it upwards. That's where the wheel is going to go. Shade smooth and apply a bevel modifier. And I just kind of adjusted things just so that they match a bit more by scaling and moving stuff around. I added a sphere and I'm going to use it for the socket. Scale it and move it around until it fits in the socket. I added some more loop cuts just to kind of tighten the shape of my mesh. Then added a cube and gave it some mean crease, and then added a subdivision surface modifier to turn it into a cylinder. And I'm going to use that to kind of shape out the arm and scale it and adjust until it fits. I gave the bottom half some bevel and slanted the top part on the x-axis. I was kind of going for something that kind of looked a little bit like Eve from Wallie. Now I'm just insetting and extruding downwards so that I can get a circle, and I'm going to duplicate the sphere and place it there, kind of like it's being connected by the two spheres. And I'm just beveling the top area and kind of just shaping stuff out, scaling and making sure that everything is adjusted the right way. I duplicated the circle and I'm going to use that for the ball wheel thingy on the bottom. And just scale it and adjust it until it fits. Then I added a mirror modifier just so that I could mirror the hole over to the other side. And I did the same for some of my other objects that I created and duplicate them over to the other side using the mirror modifier. I adjusted the shape to the hand. Now I wanted to create some additional detail, so I just selected some faces on my mesh and duplicated them and separated them from my main mesh. I did this quite a few times. I added a cube just to kind of create some kind of power source thingy for my robot. I'm just shaping it up a bit and scaling and ensuring that it fits. And I added a subsurface modifier, added some loops to give it some shape. Adding some additional details here. Giving it a bevel. And I'm adjusting this part here. For the hands, I deleted a part of the mesh on the bottom side and just kind of scale it upwards and just fill it. I'm just adding a cube and adding some mean crease to the edges so that I can turn it into a cylinder and use it to create my fingers for the robot. I added a subsurface modifier and smoothed it out and added a loop cut. And now I'm just beveling the edges at the bottom. And just adjusting the shape as I go along. And then I'm scaling it down until it matches the size that I want. And duplicate it a couple of times. And add one at the side here to create a thumb. Play around and adjust it until you get what you want, but I'm quite satisfied with this right now. So I'm just going to mirror it to the other side. So as you can see, I unwrapped some of the model off screen because it can be a very long and tedious process. I left the main body piece, so that you guys can get an idea of what I did. So in the toolbar, I use select sharp edges and it just kind of select all the sharp edges on your model. So the only thing that I have to do right now is just add a seam around here and just bring it straight up and stop right there. And just mark seam and unwrap it and you're good to go. I feel like that was good enough for what I was working on. And then I started working on the face by selecting a couple of faces and duplicating them and separating them from the main object and kind of giving it the appropriate scale. Then I duplicate it and select one of the vertices and just use proportional editing to pull it out and create this glass shade and move it around until it looks good and fits well. For the robot's eyes and mouth, I just used a circle, gave it an end gun and adjust it. And scaled it down and rotated it. Then I just duplicated it about 3 times. And this particular technique, I learned it while watching a YouTube video, so the link is in the description on how to make robot faces like this. Over in the shaders property, I gave the eye a emission shader. And made the plane black. For the glass, I added a mix shader, a diffuse, and a transparent, and just connect everything together. Then I added a brick texture and connected it to the FAC of the mix shader. And then I just UV unwrapped the plane to project from view. And I adjusted some of the settings on the brick texture until I got something that, suit my needs. If you're using Eevee, just ensure that bloom and screen space refraction is turned on. And I'm adjusting the eyes a bit. And then I add a plane and rotate it. And I'm going to put this plane before the mouthpiece and duplicate it and put it before the eyes as well. And that's just going to make it look a little bit better. The texture that I'm going to use on the robot is one that I did and it's in my material library, but don't worry, I'm going to make this available on my Gumroad for free. I'm also going to do a tutorial on it because I believe that it's really cool, and I'm going to apply this material to most of my mesh by linking the material. And for other areas, I'm just going to change the color to blue. and apply it to all the areas that I want to be blue. For the fingers, I'm going to use the same material and make it darker. For the wheel thingy, I'm going to use a texture that I got from Ambient CG, link in the description as well for that. And adjust the scale and rotation. I use the color ramp to drive the roughness. And I used a metallic texture from Ambient CG for the spheres at the arm area. And I am using Node Wrangler in case you're wondering. For the mid area, I just gave it a black material because it's not going to show up that much anyways, so I don't want to waste time trying to texture that part. Eventually, for the glass-like shader, I swapped out the diffuse for a glossy just so that I could get more reflections. I also added a color ramp and a noise texture just to give it some imperfections. And I adjust some of the values on the noise texture as well. And adjust the sliders on the color ramp to fine-tune the imperfections on the glass shade. So I wanted to put my robot in a scene, but it would have taken too long to model a sci-fi corridor, and I was just really lazy. So I went over to CG Trader and I got a sci-fi corridor over there for free. So you can check it out, it's really good and pretty detailed. It's also already lit, so I didn't have to worry a lot about that. I just made a few adjustments, deleted some of the lights, and I deleted the front area so that it doesn't collide with my camera when I change the focal length. For the camera, I have the focal length set to 85. I moved it around until I found somewhere where it looked right, so I could just put my robot in there. I added my robot to the sci-fi corridor and I gave it some lights, just a simple 3-point lighting setup with some area lights and a point light at the front. I turned on depth of field for my camera and I dropped the chest piece on my robot for the depth of field object. I was satisfied with the way it looked in rendered preview, so I decided to render it out. And this is what it looks like right outside of Blender. This is what it looks like after adding some post-processing in Photoshop. I just adjusted the exposure and gave it some sharpness. That's about it, so see you guys later.